Modern blockbusters have bigger budgets, louder explosions, and endless CGI in. So why do these old black and white and technicolor sci-fi films still feel more powerful? These 1950s classics did not need constant action to create fear, wonder, or meaning. They used silence, paranoia, faith, atomic anxiety, and unforgettable ideas. Today we are counting down the films that proved science fiction was smarter, stranger, and sometimes far more terrifying before Hollywood became obsessed with spectacle. Number 15, The Monolith Monsters, 1957. A monster movie without a monster should not work, but that is exactly why this one feels so strangely clever. The Monolith Monsters does not give us a giant lizard, a bug, a robot, or a flying saucer. Instead, it gives us black meteor fragments that grow into massive, towering stone structures, crashing down, multiplying, and threatening to bury an entire town under alien geology. That sounds ridiculous on paper, but the film treats the idea with deadly seriousness, and that confidence makes it fascinating. What makes it stand out from so many modern blockbusters is its patience. The danger does not roar. It spreads, it seeps into the landscape. It turns the desert into a ticking time bomb. The people are not running from a creature with teeth. They are running from something they barely understand. That creates a different kind of fear, the fear of nature itself suddenly becoming hostile. The film also captures that classic 1950s anxiety about science, contamination, and disaster. One small discovery becomes a town-wide emergency. One strange rock becomes a civilization-level threat. It proves that science fiction does not always need a villain. Sometimes the scariest enemy is an idea that keeps growing. Number 14, The Magnetic Monster, 1953. Before sci-fi became obsessed with sky beams and city explosions, this film made invisible danger feel terrifying. The magnetic monster is not built around a creature attack or alien invasion. Its enemy is scientific power gone out of control, a radioactive element that keeps growing stronger and more unstable, pulling energy toward itself like a silent mechanical nightmare. That alone gives the film a sharp Cold War edge. The story follows government scientists racing to understand a threat that most people cannot even see. That is what makes it interesting. The danger is not something crowds can point at and scream. It hides inside laboratories, instruments, calculations, and warnings that sound too technical until it is almost too late. In that way, the film feels closer to a disaster thriller than a typical monster movie. For a 1950s audience living under the shadow of atomic testing and nuclear fear, this concept had real bite. It suggested that mankind might create forces it could not control, then spend the rest of the movie trying to survive its own intelligence. Modern blockbusters often make science look like magic. The magnetic monster makes science feel dangerous, complicated, and urgent. That is why its quiet tension still has power. It does not shout. It hums like a machine about to explode. Number 13, It Came from Outer Space, 1953. This is the alien invasion film that refuses to act like a normal alien invasion film. It Came from Outer Space begins with a familiar image. Something strange crashes in the desert, and a small town starts whispering, but instead of turning the aliens into simple monsters, the film makes the real threat far more uncomfortable. The real threat is human fear. The desert setting gives the story a lonely, haunted atmosphere. Wide open spaces become suspicious. Ordinary people become dangerous because they do not understand what is happening. That is where the film quietly becomes smarter than expected. It is not just asking, what if aliens came to Earth? It is asking, would humans be calm enough to understand them? That question gives the movie its lasting strength. The aliens are mysterious, but the townspeople's paranoia is just as frightening. Every rumor spreads like a spark. Every strange event makes the crowd more aggressive. The film understands that fear can turn ordinary communities into mobs long before the truth is known. In a modern blockbuster, this story might become a giant battle. Here, it becomes a tense warning about misunderstanding. That is why it still feels sharp. The movie knows that sometimes humans are the problem before the aliens ever arrive. Number 12, When Worlds Collide, 1951. Before modern disaster movies turned the end of the world into digital fireworks, this film made apocalypse feel cold, mathematical, and terrifyingly inevitable. When Worlds Collide does not begin with aliens invading or monsters attacking. It begins with a prediction. A rogue star and planet are moving toward Earth, and humanity has only limited time before everything it knows is destroyed. That idea gives the film a different kind of tension. The threat cannot be punched, bombed, or negotiated with. It is cosmic. It is approaching no matter what humans believe. Scientists try to warn the world, but politics, denial, panic, and survival instincts all collide at once. In that way, the film feels surprisingly modern. It understands that the scariest part of disaster is not always the disaster itself. It is watching people argue while time disappears. What makes the film stand out is its scale of imagination, the Ark-like spaceship, the countdown atmosphere, the desperate selection of survivors, and the image of civilization facing extinction all give it a serious emotional weight. Modern blockbusters often make apocalypse noisy. When Worlds Collide makes it feel final. That is why it belongs here. It reminds us that science fiction can frighten us not by showing what attacks Earth, but by asking who gets saved when Earth itself has no future. Number 11. Earth versus the Flying Saucers, 1956. If modern blockbusters think destruction began with CGI, this film has something to say. Earth versus the Flying Saucers gave 1950s audiences one of the most iconic alien invasion spectacles of the decade. Flying saucers attacking Washington, D.C., monuments collapsing, military forces scrambling, and humanity suddenly realizing the sky itself has turned against them. The reason it still works is physical presence. Those saucers do not feel like weightless computer images. They spin, hover, crash, and cut through the screen with a strange mechanical menace. The effects may be old, but they have texture. They feel built. They feel touched by human hands. That gives the destruction a charm many modern digital battles sometimes lose. The story taps directly into Cold War anxiety. The enemy comes from above, communication fails, governments panic. Technology becomes both the threat and the only possible defense. It is pure 1950s paranoia wrapped in flying saucer spectacle, and the best part is that the film knows exactly what it is. It is not pretending to be quiet philosophy. It is a fast, bold invasion nightmare. But unlike many modern blockbusters, it still has shape, rhythm, and visual identity. Loud movies are easy. Iconic ones are harder. Number 10. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, 1953. The atomic age did not just create fear, it created monsters with memory. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms begins with a nuclear test in the Arctic, the kind of scientific triumph that 1950s cinema loved turning into a warning. But buried under the ice is something ancient, something the modern world was never meant to wake. When the Rhedosaurus rises from frozen darkness and moves toward civilization, the film becomes more than a creature feature. It becomes a nightmare about the past being dragged into the atomic present. What gives the movie its bite is how seriously it treats the disaster. Scientists investigate, witnesses are doubted, authorities hesitate. The creature is not thrown at the audience immediately. Its threat builds through mystery, sightings, and disbelief. That slow escalation makes the arrival of the monster feel earned. Its impact is huge, too. This film helped shape the atomic monster craze and influenced the giant creature films that followed. The stop-motion effects give the beast a strange physical sadness. It does not feel like a digital object. It feels like a living relic, confused, angry, and doomed. Modern blockbusters often destroy cities because destruction looks impressive. This film makes destruction feel like consequence. That is why it still matters. The monster is not just big, it is a warning with teeth. Number 9. The Fly, 1958. This is not scary because a man becomes a monster. It is scary because the man knows exactly what he has lost. The Fly takes a classic science fiction idea, a brilliant inventor experimenting with teleportation, and turns it into something tragic, intimate, and unforgettable. There are no armies here, no alien fleets, no planet-ending explosions. Just one family, one experiment, and one mistake that cannot be undone. The story works because it begins with curiosity, not madness. The scientist is not trying to rule the world, he is trying to change it. That makes the horror sharper. When the experiment goes wrong and his body becomes fused with a fly, The film does not treat it like a cheap shock. It treats it like a nightmare of identity, shame, and helplessness. The famous reveal still has power because the emotional setup is so strong. By the time the audience sees the full horror, they are not just looking at a creature, they are looking at a person trapped inside a disaster created by his own ambition. Many modern sci-fi films chase bigger transformations and louder body horror, but The Fly understands that tragedy lasts longer than spectacle. Its final sting is not the image. It is the feeling that science opened a door and a human soul paid the price. Number 8. Them. 1954. The smartest monster movies know one secret. Do not show the monster too soon. Them begins with something far more disturbing than a giant ant. It begins with silence, wreckage, and a little girl wandering through the desert in shock. That opening is why the film still works. Before the audience sees the threat, they feel the aftermath. Something terrible has happened, and the movie makes us wait to understand it. That patience gives them a suspenseful power many modern blockbusters forget. The giant ants are the headline, but the investigation is the engine. Police, scientists, and the military slowly piece together the truth, turning the film into a procedural nightmare. Every clue matters. Every discovery makes the problem bigger. The atomic age context gives it extra force. Nuclear testing has created something unnatural, and now nature has become organized, aggressive, and terrifyingly efficient. The ants are not just oversized insects. They are a symbol of mankind, disturbing forces it cannot easily put back. What makes them stand above many creature features is its seriousness. It never winks at the audience. It treats the threat like a national emergency, and that gives even the wildest scenes a grounded intensity. Modern blockbusters often rush to the monster. Them earns it. That is why its opening still feels sharper than half the CGI chaos made today. Number 7. The Incredible Shrinking Man, 1957. Some sci-fi films make the universe bigger. This one makes one man smaller until existence itself becomes terrifying. The Incredible Shrinking Man begins with a strange radioactive mist, an ordinary moment that quietly turns into a life sentence. At first, the problem seems almost impossible to believe. A man is shrinking. But the film does something brilliant. It refuses to treat the idea as a gimmick. Instead, it becomes a psychological survival story. As his body gets smaller, his world becomes more cruel, his marriage changes, his dignity collapses. His home, once safe and familiar, becomes a battlefield filled with impossible dangers. A cat becomes a predator. A basement becomes a wilderness. A spider becomes a final boss before modern movies even knew what that phrase meant. What makes the film so powerful is the emotional devastation. This is not just about size, it is about identity. What happens when a man loses control of his body, his place in the world, and the life he thought belonged to him? The effects are inventive, but the real achievement is the mood. The film moves from domestic drama to survival horror to existential reflection with surprising confidence. Modern blockbusters often confuse scale with meaning. The Incredible Shrinking Man proves the opposite. Sometimes the smallest story contains the biggest fear. Number 6. The Blob, 1958. Sometimes the scariest monster is the one that has no face, no voice, and no reason to stop. The Blob takes one of the simplest sci-fi horror ideas of the decade and turns it into something strangely unforgettable. A meteor crashes near a small town, releasing a jelly-like alien substance that consumes everything it touches. It does not roar, it does not negotiate, it just grows. That simplicity is exactly what makes the film work. The threat feels almost childish at first, but the movie slowly turns it into a nightmare of helplessness. The more people ignore the warnings, the stronger the creature becomes. That gives the story a sharp teen rebellion energy, especially as the young characters realize the adults will not believe them until the danger is already spreading through the town. Released in 1958, the film captures that perfect late 1950s anxiety. Something alien, shapeless, and unstoppable slipping into ordinary American life. The famous theater sequence remains iconic because it turns a place of entertainment into a panic zone. Modern blockbusters often overdesign their monsters until they feel artificial. The Blob proves a terrifying idea can be almost absurdly simple. No face, no motive, no mercy, just hunger, growth, and one town learning too late that the warning was real. Number 5, Forbidden Planet 1956. This is the film where 1950s science fiction stopped looking like a cheap warning sign and started looking like the future. Forbidden Planet did not just send astronauts to another world, it built an entire atmosphere around mystery, beauty, danger, and buried human darkness. On the surface, it is a space adventure about a rescue mission arriving on planet Altair 4, but underneath that bright widescreen color is something much stranger. A story about ancient alien power and the terrifying things hidden inside the human mind. The film feels grand because it takes its world seriously. The planet is not just a backdrop, it feels like a lost civilization's graveyard. The invisible threat is not some simple monster thrown in for action. It comes from ideas, guilt, intelligence, and desire. That makes the suspense feel more psychological than mechanical. Then there is Robbie the Robot, one of the most iconic creations in classic sci-fi. He is not just a prop, he gives the film personality, humor, and a sense of technological wonder that still feels charming today. What makes Forbidden Planet embarrass many modern blockbusters is its confidence. It has visual imagination, philosophical weight, and genuine mystery. Modern sci-fi often gives us galaxies full of noise. This film gives us one planet full of secrets, and somehow that feels bigger. Number 4, The War of the Worlds, 1953. Before alien invasions became giant CGI traffic jams, this film made the end of the world feel beautiful, terrifying, and almost religious. The War of the Worlds takes H.G. Wells' famous story and drags it into the atomic age fear of 1953. The result is not just a movie about Martians attacking Earth, it is a movie about mankind facing something so advanced, so cold, and so unstoppable that all human confidence begins to collapse. The Martian war machines are unforgettable. They do not stomp or roar, they glide. Their manta ray shapes, glowing colors, and eerie movement give them a physical presence that still feels strange today. They seem less like machines and more like floating nightmares. That design choice alone gives the film an identity many modern invasion movies never find. But the real power is in the atmosphere. Cities burn, armies fail, scientists search for answers. Ordinary people panic, and beneath the destruction, the film keeps touching something deeper: faith, helplessness, and the terrifying possibility that human weapons may mean nothing. Modern blockbusters often bury alien invasion stories under endless action. This one understands dread. It lets the audience feel small. It makes the sky dangerous. And by the end, it proves that sometimes the most powerful spectacle is not the loudest one. It is the one that makes humanity look truly fragile. Number 3, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. 1956. The scariest invasion in 1950s. Cinema did not come with flying saucers. It came with neighbors who smiled wrong. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is one of those films that gets under the skin because its threat feels ordinary at first. A small-town doctor starts noticing strange complaints. People insist their loved ones look the same, but somehow are not the same. No wounds, no explosions, no obvious monster, just a creeping feeling that the human soul is being quietly erased. That is what makes the movie so brilliant. It turns paranoia into a full-story engine. Every familiar face becomes suspicious. Every normal street feels infected. The film does not need massive sets or expensive effects because its real weapon is mistrust. Once the idea enters your mind, the entire world of the movie becomes unstable. The political meaning is part of its power. Audiences have long read it through different lenses: fear of conformity, fear of communism, fear of social pressure, fear of losing individuality. That flexibility is why it still feels alive. It is not trapped in one decade. It keeps changing depending on what the audience is afraid of. Modern blockbusters often explain too much and show too much. Invasion of the Body Snatchers wins by whispering. It knows that the most terrifying question is not what is attacking us, it is how would we know if everyone around us had already changed. Number 2, The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. This is the rare alien movie where the visitor does not arrive to destroy humanity. He arrives to judge it. The Day the Earth Stood Still begins with a flying saucer landing in Washington, D.C., and immediately turns one of the most familiar sci-fi images into something serious, elegant, and unnerving. Klaatu does not come roaring out with an army. He comes with a message. And that message is simple enough to understand but frightening enough to haunt the entire film. Humanity must control its violence before it spreads beyond Earth. That is why the movie still feels important. It does not need constant action because the idea itself is the explosion. A peaceful alien walks among ordinary people and sees a world full of suspicion, fear, weapons, politics, and panic. The film asks whether humans are mature enough to survive their own power. That question was urgent in the atomic age, and honestly, it has not aged much. Gort, the silent robot, adds the perfect visual threat. He barely moves, but he feels unstoppable. The contrast between Klaatu's calm intelligence and Gort's terrifying power gives the film its balance. Peace offered with consequences attached. Modern sci-fi often mistakes complexity for intelligence. The Day the Earth Stood Still is simple, direct, and devastating. It is not about how big the explosion is. It is about whether civilization deserves to avoid one. Number 1, Godzilla, 1954. Most monster movies ask, how do we kill it? Godzilla asks a darker question. What if the monster is our own history coming back to punish us? Released in 1954, Godzilla is often remembered as the beginning of a giant monster franchise, but the original film is far heavier than its pop culture image suggests. This is not just a creature stomping through buildings. This is a national nightmare shaped by fire, radiation, grief, and the shadow of nuclear destruction. The power of Godzilla comes from how mournful it feels. The monster is terrifying, but the destruction is not treated like entertainment. Streets burn, families suffer, hospitals fill, people look exhausted, stunned, and helpless. The film understands that catastrophe is not just spectacle, it leaves trauma behind. Godzilla himself works because he is more than a beast. He is nature wounded by mankind's weapons. He is the atomic age given claws, scales, and a roar. Every appearance feels like a reminder that human invention can create consequences too enormous to control. The film also has moral weight through the oxygen destroyer, a weapon so powerful that its creator fears what humanity might do with it. That idea gives the ending real tragedy, not just victory. Modern blockbusters can flatten cities with perfect digital effects, but few make destruction feel this personal. Godzilla does not just embarrass modern spectacle because it is iconic. It embarrasses it because it remembers that fear means nothing without sorrow. So maybe the real question is not whether 1950s sci-fi looks old, but why so much modern sci-fi feels empty beside it. These films had monsters, aliens, robots, and impossible worlds, but underneath all that, they had fear, meaning, and imagination. Which one still holds up best today? Drop your pick below and tell us which classic we missed.